Waibalya Namani, and welcome to Nganabawanga, Stories from the Mobile Language Team. I'm your host, Jaylon Newchurch, and I'm a proud Narungga and Kaurna man. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're recording on today, which is the Kaurna people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Each episode, we share stories from the Mobile Language Team and Aboriginal communities across South Australia, highlighting projects that strengthen, revive, and reawaken Aboriginal languages. So let's get into it. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Joining me is Celena a First Nations woman from British Columbia, Canada. We both work at the Mobile Language Team, but we come from very different language communities. In this episode, we're simply having an open conversation, sharing our own language journeys, comparing language revitalisation in Australia and Canada, and reflecting on why this work matters to us. So Celena, can you introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit more of what we're going to touch on in this episode?
I'm Celena Ardenberg. I'm a Nedut'en woman from the Lake Babine Nation in British Columbia, Canada. I am a linguistics officer, so I focus on resource production and book production and social media stuff. So we're today talking about language revitalization in kind of a general sense because, Jaylon and I both come from different language communities and we have differing experiences as young Indigenous people, learning language, being involved in language work, and all of that kind of stuff that goes with it. So we're just going to have a general chat about it today in different aspects like, what's caused, language decline in our communities or, personal experiences learning language and just some general kind of, observations and on language revitalization efforts, especially because that's what the Mobile Language Team does. I'll start off by going into just language decline and language loss. So in Canada, we have a very similar colonial history to Australia. There is some key differences that I won't get into as much, but for Canada, it was very similar in the sense of forced assimilation, colonial policies, but Canada had a very strong network of Catholic schools that they sent all the Indian kids to. And from my perspective, from my community, we saw a huge language decline with all of our elders and our grandparents and their parents going to these schools and being essentially punished for speaking their native tongue. What about you?
Yeah, I guess I won't sort of talk about a general overview, but specifically in Ghana and Narungga in South Australia, it was sort of along the same lines that, Aboriginal people were removed or misplaced from their traditional homelands and were placed on missions. Some that, some of our viewers may know, like Point Pierce Mission, Brauken, Kunaba Mission, so there's a fair few. But pretty much they got removed, placed on there, all sort of moved around everywhere and were, forbidden to speak their language, specifically in Ghana. It was actually, we had two German missionaries back in 1836. They came over to document the language and they wanted to convert Ghana children to Christians. So, a lot of it was just to learn language, just to convert Ghana people into Christians. They were actually first off encouraged to speak their language because the German missionaries thought to convert these people, we'd have to speak in their language to be able to convert them. So that's how a lot of the documentation happened. But as that happened, I guess it sort of moved on from that. Nope, you weren't allowed to speak your language. If you did, you were punished for it as well. And I guess that was sort of the big overview of it. And I guess being the last speaker in 1929. And so, Ghana was a sleeping language since then and has reawoken in the 1990s.
Yeah. I think what's really cool about you coming from the Kaurna language group is that you were a part of that revitalization effort in a sense. You, as a young Aboriginal person, got involved in language work and continue to do language work. So I think that's really cool because, I didn't. I didn't. but I'm trying. Like, it's
Mhm.
just a matter of, it's hard, especially living here, not having access to not only the speakers that remain, because unfortunately, the speakers in my family are either passed or refuse just out of pure fear.
Mhm.
So I think my only exposure to language as a kid would have been my grandma. And I only ever learned like hello, or she used to call my brother Denitez, which I think meant little boy or something, or little man. And that was the only kind of words I was exposed to. But I remember going to preschool in Musqueam, and I learned Hulklimatum there, and I also learned language in Cowichan Valley on the island, which was another there's Hulklimatum and then Hulklimatum. So, both of those.
Mhm.
And I guess my mother always told me that she never learned the language 'cause, my grandma just, like, kind of refused to teach her, and she says it was because she wanted to talk smack with her sisters
Mhm.
about everybody else in the family.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why they didn't pass it on.
Mhm.
But realistically, if we look at the history, unfortunately, my grandmother did attend, Immaculata Day School up in, I think it's Burns Lake, but we might have to fact check that. But I'm pretty sure it was in Burns Lake. And there was, like, a key difference between day schools and residential schools, where residential schools, kids were taken away to live and be, like, permanently, whereas day schools, they still got to go home afterwards. So, it would just be like, I don't know, I guess regular school hours. But all of my mother's side went to that day school, and, my uncle is currently doing a lot of law stuff in regards to, advocating for the fact that day schools should be recognized as just as bad as residential schools. And on my grandfather's side, he was from the DeKelf language group, and he also went to LeJac Residential School. And the only time I ever heard him speak language in my life was just before he passed,
Mhm.
which shows, like, he still remembered a lot of it, but I think it was just that fear
Yeah.
to not pass it down, you know?
Mm.
Do you have similar experiences?
Yeah, like, I think my grandparents and, we think colonization was, "Oh, yeah, it's so long ago," but really, really wasn't. It was only less than what? I don't know, less than 250 years,
But
something
I
like
guess, like, colonization could be, you talk about it and it could be, like, marked as the moment those people got off the boat and
Mm,
arrived, but I think I see colonization as, like, an ongoing process in just different ways than what our ancestors experienced.
yeah, yeah. The similar experience that I had, yeah, was, I guess, my grandparents also grew up. They, only learnt probably had a little bit of knowledge of language. Um, but that was the thing because of what happened and people were displaced onto different missions and stuff like that. Words from all over sort of South Australia were being used. Ngarrindjeri words were being used in Point Pearce. Other words, Ghana words were also being used there. So I guess my grandparents all grew up just with sort of words or phrases, and they weren't entirely sure where they were from. So yeah, and it wasn't until later years when I first started actually in depth learning language that okay, this is actually a Ghana word, or this is a shared word between these two, or something like that. Um, but yeah, they didn't really grow up knowing much language. They had little bits and pieces. Again, because of the fact that they like a lot of the old people were told that no, you can't speak your language anymore. So yeah, I grew up learning a little bit of language. Again, I wasn't entirely sure of where it was from, but I knew that it was in an Aboriginal language. So yeah, it wasn't until I was in year 8 where I actually started first getting a bit more in depth of my language learning.
Yeah, we'll touch on Ghana for sure because that's so interesting that you come from one of the biggest, like, kinda case studies, I
Hmm.
guess, of a revival language. But just shout out to our other, languages that have had really hopeful and great stories, like, there was Nest kind of modeling, and, I mean, all of them kinda did, like, a combination of both immersion and language nests, And just for our listeners, a language nest basically is like, I guess, a model for early immersion from 0 to 5 years old. We saw success and hope stories from Maori, Hawaiian, Mohawk. Mohawk mostly specialized in like adult immersion, though, which I think is great because that gives me hope as an adult. I'll still be able to learn it someday. And the Coast Salish, like, they have a very successful program. They were actually just, like, here in Australia
Oh,
with, First Languages Australia. Like, they were up in the desert and just did, like, workshops.
had no
I
idea.
know.
No.
Who told me the
Yeah.
family was coming to visit?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think what I love hearing from you, Jaylon, is, you know, your journey with learning your language because it
Mhm.
is hopeful and, like, I am low key jealous of you in a way.
Mhm.
Um, so if you would love to share your story and maybe give anybody else in my position
Yeah.
some glimmer of hope.
Yeah. I guess where do I start? I guess my language learning journey, yeah, started when I was younger. Like I said, just learning words, phrases here and there. And sort of, I think it was Aboriginal English is what a lot of Nungas will grow up with. And just a quick side note, Nunga is the word used for the South Australian Aboriginal people. Unless you ask someone where they're actually from, they'll tell you exactly where they're from. But yeah, Nungas is sort of like the general term that we use. Yeah, so I just grew up sort of learning a little bit of Aboriginal English. And then, yeah, it wasn't until in year eight, I had a teacher, Jack Buckskin, and he was there teaching Ghana at my school. Yeah, sort of learnt that for a couple of years. Then I heard that he was teaching a TAFE course in Towndy College, and I ended up doing that in year 11 and 12. So I ended up, not until later on, but getting a certificate 3 in learning an endangered Aboriginal language. So yeah, it took every Friday in year 11 and 12 to be able to go and study that. Pretty much that was my language learning journey from there. Afterwards, would be involved in sort of night classes, you know, hearing language through dance. I ended up getting on a couple of language committees. Yeah, and just sort of learning language through any sort of space really. It wasn't until I got to 2019 I was working just as casual, like yeah, part time, 2 days a week, um, for Ghana Pinchindi, at the University of Adelaide, and pretty much my role there was just making um, resources. So yeah, making sure that I was using language and how I can sort of distribute and share our language as well. More so through that media space,
Yeah.
through online media. So that was my sort of role and journey in the language course. Yeah, was involved in summer schools for that was taught by Rob Amory. He then became my boss in 2019. He was the sort of main man that made that space for Ghana people and Nungas to be able to come together and reclaim our language again, I
Yeah.
guess. So he started that back in the 1990s. He did a PhD on Ghana language. I can't remember exactly what. But yeah, just Ghana language in general, and then sort of made it a space for people to come to and I guess, yeah, reawaken it and relearn their language and their mother tongue. So, yeah, we had a lot of elders that would come in, they would do workshops and stuff. The first thing that they did was just singing songs. So, yeah, that was the easiest way for people to learn languages. And, that was back in the 1990s. And now we're in 2026. So,
Yeah.
that's,
He spent his whole career doing it.
yeah, pretty much like
Yeah.
over 30 years now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if it wasn't for him, we really wouldn't have. And him and the elders that, like, helped him because that's originally what he wanted to do as well, was give the language back to Ghana people. So that's what he did. And, he's worked across many generations, some being, as old as my grandparents. Yeah, right down to me. So it's been a big journey for him, but also me as well. So, yeah.
So when Rob started this in the 90s, what was he working with? Like, what was he building up? Do you know the process there?
So it was, yeah, a little bit of history around it. Was 1836, the German missionaries came here. They documented as much language as they could. I can't remember their first names, but yeah, Tykerman and Sherman were the people that were heavily referenced. And so they had documented, and they've got some sources that are used now as their primary source for Ghana language. That's what Rob sort of used
Yeah.
as that. And as a linguist, I get a lot of questions like, oh, how does someone be able to understand and read the knowledge? I guess that's just what you learn. Maybe you could touch on that.
Like in terms of like archival research, probably not. In terms of, what would be the next steps. But I think it's cool to hear how languages build their resources and like where they build these resources from. Because in the case where there's maybe not a lot of speakers, or the speakers can't be like, I don't know, located, or maybe they are not comfortable sharing, like it's cool to hear about the different ways you can go about like building that database and building those resources. Because, yeah, I assume that a lot of the cases, especially here, would be from those missionaries. And then also back in Canada, a lot of them came from like Bible transcriptions from those residential schools. So it is cool to kind of make sense of it in that way and then see the different ways revival happens, I guess. And I think what's great about hearing the different ways, like different languages come like back with more speakers and more interest and all that stuff, is hearing that like revival doesn't happen in one set way. Like there's not one formula that's going to fit all of the Indigenous languages in the world.
No.
You've got to kind of, I don't know, navigate your own way in finding like what's going to work best, because all of the languages are so unique, so different. They all have a different set of like archives in whatever museum. It's also different for each and every one of us.
Yeah.
So hearing the different ways to go about reviving is really inspirational to me. And that's what I find so fascinating about this line of work.
Yeah.
It's like there's no set way to do it. You've got to just find your own way and what way is like best for your people and best for your community, you know?
Yeah.
So our next talking point is, I guess, our kind of thoughts and feelings about keeping the language well and keeping, why language work is important. And I do think like sometimes these kind of chats are what we talk about in the office anyways, like let's be real, and this is just us recording them now. But it's also cool because we're like essentially the same age. We have very different life experiences, but we have so many similar perspectives on so many different things regarding language and identity and like just kind of navigating the world as an Indigenous person and as an Indigenous like young adult as well. Even though maybe we're creeping up to 30s now, but I'm still a young adult and so are you.
Yeah.
So why do you think language work is important? Like, especially for Indigenous men to be involved in?
I think that is important because, like, if I just broaden it up a little bit and just say that language is important, because I think it does touch on more so a thing for identity. And, I've seen it across a range of ages, like from older men that are like, getting back in touch with language and learning language. It's a tool that is able to inspire people. And I've seen that from older men to like guys my age. And even, I was teaching in a school and doing some language workshops and working with the young boys there. I've seen it where it's it's a powerful tool. I've seen kids that come in and they will run amok and they're naughty in all their other classes, but yet I've had one little boy in my class and he was good as gold, and the way he was just wanting to learn about language and stuff, he was good as gold. And I was like, oh, is he like this in all these other classes? And the teacher was like, nah, he's a little bit distracted and just sort of runs amok. So to see that, it's like, that's why it's important, because language is a strong like
Anchor.
strong anchor for
Yeah.
Aboriginal men and identity.
Yeah.
Even though I don't think he was a Ghana person, but it was still good for him to be able to learn a language that he feels he can relate to. So yeah, I think that's the important part of it, is that it's a strong thing of our identity. It teaches us about ourselves, not only about ourselves, our family, our kinship, our land, from why the seasons are the way they are to, all different things. So that's why I think language work is
Mm.
important. And it's, I think now we're not really, language was something that was passed on orally. Now we've got the resources to be able to document it, and, you know, with internet, living in a digital age, we're able to
Mm.
access that knowledge, wherever we're from, like wherever
Mm.
we are, at whatever age, at whatever time as well. So we
Yeah.
can, you know, I'm not saying, yeah, there's always language where it's used in a space that, you can't really get it in a digital
Mm.
space, but if you're not in that space, you can also get it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think language work really is important for us to be able to document it and keep that alive. Because I'm noticing now we're not probably spending as much more time. This is just from my perspective and my experiences. We're not spending much time where we actually are sitting down, talking about
Mm.
language and talking about, you know, um, what's going on in the world and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, being able to just sort of sit down and even sing to my nieces and nephews and stuff like
Yeah.
that, we're able to incorporate and use language
Yeah.
in an everyday basis type thing. So yeah.
I think that's great. And would you say, like, when you started learning Garna, how did your identity kind of shift? Because, say, for me, for example, like, I'm a mixed Indigenous person. So my mother is First Nations and my father is, he's Dutch, but he's like a first gen immigrant here. And that's why I live here.
Hmm.
Um, do you think, so I think learning my language to me feels like I'm almost like crawling back to that, like, indigeneity, that side, like, and I feel like, I mean, I'm loud and proud Indigenous woman,
Hmm.
and I scream it from the rooftops, but I guess within me as well, there's also that kind of, like, internal shame that I don't know my language. So do you think participating in, like, learning Garna and doing all that stuff, do you feel like it strengthened it? Or, like, did you feel any kinds of shame for not knowing it before you started learning?
I think I did feel like I've always been taught when I was younger to always be proud of who I am. And so I am a strong, black, proud man. And I guess not knowing it when I was younger, it was a little bit, I think it really hit me when I was in New Zealand for my 21st birthday.
Mm.
And being able, that's when I probably first felt shame that I wasn't able to be a first language speaker.
Mm.
Going over there, and it was like hearing everyone else speak this language, and I was like, wow, I feel so displaced.
Yeah.
And like I felt like I wasn't, yeah, like I think I got that feeling of, shame that, I can't speak my
Mm.
mother tongue language. But yeah, back here though, in Australia, I do speak like bits and pieces. Um, I wouldn't say I'm a fluent speaker, but I can, understand it, and
Mm.
I'll probably respond back in English.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think for me it did strengthen my cultural identity,
Yeah.
learning a bit more about language, because, you've got to have language and culture, they come hand in hand. So
Mm.
you can't really learn one without the other. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it really did though strengthen who I was as an
Yeah.
Aboriginal person, as a Narungga and Ghana man. So yeah.
Mm. I guess it's hard, like, in that way, because I deal with, like, the grappling thoughts of, I have to learn it because, like, if not me, then who? Like, like, and I feel like everybody maybe should have that mindset. Like, I obviously there's gonna be people my age in my community learning the language, but if I'm here by myself, like, I have to kind of, I don't know, motivate myself because I'm not surrounded by my family that are like, "Well, you should get to learn in your language," you know?
Mm,
Um, and we do have an online learning website, and it's still just quite hard, if because 'cause I'm off country, I'm
mhm.
off land, and, like, limited natives around these parts, I fear.
Yeah.
Not saying that there is none, I met one, so there is, but she's crazy, so not
Yeah.
me. That ain't me.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess it's like I see it as important to keep going because I kind of want to be a part of what takes it back, like takes what we had back.
Yeah.
Like I want to be a part of that movement. And then I even think like in terms of, you know, living here for as long as I have, if I ever have children one day, I imagine always like raising my children with language.
Hmm.
And I've got to learn it before I'm able to do that. And because if hypothetically, these hypothetical children are born here, that's another layer of disconnect.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and
Yeah.
I can't imagine not having children being raised with my culture because that's what my mom did for me.
Hmm.
And that's what I should do for them.
Yeah.
And not only that, like my brother's children, if he has them, just anyone from my line, like I feel like it's my responsibility to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I want to do it for my ancestors, my grandma, my grandpa. Like I want to do it for my aunties, my uncles, my auntie grandmas, my cousin brothers. Um, I want to do it for all of them.
Yeah.
And like I think that's what inspired me to go into higher education studies in this area, even though it was a real Western way of learning. And I think that's also like tailored my mindset to be able to learn things in a certain way.
Hmm.
So learning an indigenous language after, you know, however long, how long was I in school? 20 years.
Yeah.
Um, to be like, oh, you can only learn this orally. I'm like, what do you mean? How do I spell that? Like,
Mm.
and wait, one more time for me. Like, it's really hard to get out of that mindset. How did you find that? Like, doing Garnet in school as well as going to school in like a Western kind of way. Like, you know, you're taught that take the notes, you know, do
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Yeah. And that was a bit like it's it was different. It
Mm,
was yeah, I guess because it was passed down orally. For me it was, yeah, trying to understand. Lucky I guess I was younger, still brain was developing and stuff. So I was able to just I can't actually remember. All I remember is just learning in class and we would just I'll be honest, actually, the first things that we learnt was, and that's the thing that you do with kids, is swear words. So,
oh, yeah.
yeah, we learned swear words first because then it actually got us engaged.
Mm,
But then after that, we got into the serious nitty gritty stuff.
mm,
But yeah, some things were a bit more easier to see and comprehend when it was written down.
mm,
But yeah, other things it was like, yeah, I think the main thing for me was just listening to someone and just imitating them. That was the biggest thing that
yeah.
worked for me.
Yeah. I think that's one of the revival kind of efforts my nation is doing right now. So like a mentor apprentice kind of program
Mm.
where you basically just shadow like a speaker for like 2 weeks
Hmm.
and you're not speaking English. You're
Yeah.
just in language all of the time.
Hmm.
Um I imagine after like because we did that summer course together. We did the Pitjara Young Kanjara summer course together
Yeah.
where like they didn't show us the written version.
No.
My brain was like, "Oh my goodness, I can't do it."
Mhm,
But then I feel like after a few days, it did get easier.
mhm.
Um, so I kinda do see how that mentor apprentice, like,
Yeah, it works.
method works,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
But I think in those first few days, if I was just, like, you know, shadowing someone's auntie as she grocery shops, I'm gonna be like, "What is she telling me
yeah,
to
it'd be a
do?"
lot. Yeah,
Um, but I think that's a really cool way of doing it as well, you know? I imagine, like, you would be great at doing something like that, you know? If
yeah,
there was, like, a young person in your family that wanted to learn and then, you know, then it gets you speaking and you remembering it more, especially because, well, I'm not speaking Ghana with you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And quickly just going back to that as well,
Mm,
I feel for you as well because that's the same thing. Yes, I'm surrounded by other Ghana people,
mm,
but like we're sort of there's like a linkage there, but some like we don't cross paths every
mm,
day. It's not like my immediate family or just that little bit on the
mm,
outside as well. I'm talking like if there's a relation, it's a little bit more extended. So
yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't see them all the time and stuff. But yeah, so it is. I found that hard to be able to try and use the language when you don't have anyone to speak it to. So that's the other thing.
mm,
It's you have to use your language to, yeah, you use it or lose it.
mm,
So the easiest way for me that I have found it is either I try and force it upon my family that's there, even though they've got no understanding of it, and then be able to speak it in English afterwards. Or the other thing is I don't even use the English afterwards. I would just say it to my nieces and nephews. My main thing to them is just singing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw like a video about a family, and then in one room in that household, it was only language.
Yeah.
So, like, if the kid is asking in the kitchen, Mom, I'm hungry. Can I have a snack? She's like, nah, you've got to say it in language.
hmm
And then it kind of gives that like one room in that house that is strictly that. And I think that's a cool way to go about it too. Especially with your nieces and nephews, them
hmm
being so young. Like
Yeah.
if you did, I don't know, bathroom or like lounge room,
Yeah.
um, and you only speak in Garna with
Yeah.
them in that room. Like I feel like some kids, if that happened to me as a kid, I would walk into a different room and then just shout, shout it in English or what I wanted if
hmm
I didn't remember. So it'd be interesting to see how that would work.
Yeah. And I think that has been done before. Like
Mm.
Jack, like who I'm close with, yeah, he sort of did that with his kids as well. He would be in the shower or like in the bathroom type thing and would only use language there. And so
Mm.
the kids actually grew up just only knowing the Ghana words for things in the bathroom or doing
Yeah.
things in the bathroom. Um, they wouldn't know what it is in English. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so cool. That
Mm.
is so cool. Like, I would love to do something like that. All right. So I think my next point, and we kind of touched on it within that last point, but again, language and culture interconnected. All of these layers of revitalization and language work are all interconnected as well.
Yeah.
There's so many different aspects you could focus on and like literally just talk about for hours.
hmm
But that's not what we're doing. We're trying our best to zoom through a general kind of overview reflections.
Yeah.
But I guess it would be like I touched on my kind of resistance to learn language and, like the kind of shame connected to it. Um, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, especially like people younger than me, my age, or even like older adults or older elders that maybe forgot. So I guess I wanted to kind of chat about how do we overcome that? Like, as Indigenous people, as First Nations people, how do we overcome that resistance to get involved in language work?
hmm
I feel like everybody has a turning point where something in their brain just goes like, yeah, I'm I'm gonna get involved. Like I'm gonna do it. Like I'm
Yeah.
finally gonna do it kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that? Or
I think there was a time, yeah. My turning point, I guess, was in high school. It was in year 10. I was really pressured to be like, okay, now you have the like all my care teacher and other teachers were like, what do you want to do now? You got to like decide. Year 11 and 12 is important because you got to make sure you set something up for them when you go to uni and whatever. Um, and I was just like stressing, stressing out because I'm like, what do I want to do? Where it was like,
I'm 16.
yeah. But I guess it was right in front of me the whole time. And I was like, oh, seeing Jack up in the classroom being an education teacher, like a language teacher, and I had no idea. And then it just something hit me and it was like, oh, maybe that's what I want to do.
Mm.
So yeah. Um at that point in time, that's what I wanted to do was be a language teacher. So I thought for the next 2 years I'll just do whatever I have to do to be able to get into
Mm.
a teaching degree. Um
Mm.
Later on that didn't happen. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
was gonna
that
say you're
was
not a
the
teacher.
no. But yeah, that was the turning point for
Yeah.
me is sort of realizing, okay, maybe I wanted to get into language
Yeah.
and, if it wasn't an actual teacher, like qualified teacher,
Mm.
just being I don't know, language instructor or something
But
like
that's
that.
the thing. I feel like being a language teacher in like the view that you go get a bachelor of education and you go to uni
Hmm.
to be a language teacher, like none of the universities here are going to teach you how to be a language teacher.
No.
Like that's just something inherent in that Indigenous worldview and in that First Nations worldview
hmm
of our views of education and how we teach the next generation. So you're still a language teacher,
Yeah.
but you didn't go and do the Bachelor of Education. Like you teaching your nieces and nephews and singing to them, that's a language teacher to me.
Yeah.
So you are, but like not in the way that,
In a Western world
anybody
or
else
something.
would like
Yeah.
interpret if you just said, "Oh, I'm a language teacher." And they're like, "Oh, where'd you go to school?"
Mm,
You're not that in that sense, but you
no.
are
Yeah.
in a like a indigenous sense,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um Yeah, I think that's super interesting
Yeah.
because I feel like I've had many turning points at
Mhm.
certain points. Like, so in high school, the first time I went back to Canada after I moved here
Yeah.
was like a turning point of, oh, I need to be more connected
Mhm.
um, with my indigeneity. I need to learn how to take care of this identity better. I need to take care of myself better and be more kind to myself as well
Mhm.
because it was no one's fault that I migrated here. Like, it's no one's fault. I
Mm.
mean, there's no one to blame,
No.
but it is like I can't have access to everything all the time. So it is like I have to learn to be kinder with myself. So at that point, I started identifying more with my like First Nations. I've always called them sides because I think like I've got this white side and this Indigenous side, and I'm in this in between bit. Like
Mhm.
I exist within this in between space of both of them. But I started being more inclined to do it once I, like, went back to Canada and was reminded how beautiful my culture is and how beautiful my land is.
Yeah.
Um, I was just so inspired by that. And then in uni, I think, when I was doing my thesis about this experience of, like, identity and Indigenous identity being off country and
Mhm.
being off continent, like, I'm just gone, you know?
Mm.
I did that whole thing reflecting on, what I've learned and, um, in my life experience and, like, touched on narratives of, like, turning points where I was kinda, like, fed up of, um, having to explain myself and, like, why I'm here and, like, why I don't know my language and why
Mm.
this, why that. And I think that was another turning point to get more involved in language work. And then I think the biggest turning point I've had so far was maybe my first week here,
Yeah.
where I think I was sitting down and I was chatting with someone, and it was just kind of like, "What words do you know in your language?" And I was like, "Hadi,
Mm.
Soensen," like hitting him with that. That's all I got.
Yeah.
So, what next, kind of thing. And then I looked at everything that was being done here, and I saw everything in a new light where it was like, you know, this learning language is like this mountain to climb for me.
Mhm.
And like I want to do it, and like internally I need to do it,
Yeah.
but it just seemed so far away and so unachievable. But like starting here and seeing all the efforts, all the language groups here put into maintenance, into resources, into everything, made me think that maybe the mountain isn't as big anymore, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's been my most recent turning point of like, okay, I could do this. Like,
Yeah.
I could definitely do this because, yeah, everybody else is. And I think that ties into that like responsibility. Like, I'm part of that responsibility to keep the language going.
Yeah. And definitely and that's the thing I think with languages, especially like revival languages, or sort of maintenance languages. Not so much maintenance languages actually, but yeah, it's the revival languages is that specifically with Ghana, or Naranga, I think we're not gonna see a like I think it's called an L1 level one speaker, maybe in my lifetime.
Mm,
But I think we're setting something up for the next generation. If it's not my kids that'll be fluent speakers, who knows? It would be my grandkids
mm.
or great grandkids.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I think that's what, you know, it's a little bit disheartening, but at the same time empowering
Yeah.
because it's like, I might not be able to fluently speak my language, but
Mm,
I'm doing what I can to be able to get it back to where it was so that, one day in the far future,
mm.
yeah, we can be able to speak, fluently
Yeah.
and have a
Yeah.
fluent level one speaker. So yeah,
Yeah. And
but
that's all a part of that reclamation, like
yeah,
taking
yeah,
it back.
yeah,
And I love that.
mm,
And I think it is kind of like, I don't know, disheartening, especially like coming from revival communities and revival language groups.
mm-hmm,
But I'm trying like to shift my perspective now to stop focusing solely on what is missing because like I've made some resources. I've made a lot of resources since
mm-hmm,
I've been here. And like I can do it,
yeah,
I can we can make resources. That's
Yeah.
fine. That's fine. And it just seems like impossible outside of this space because like, you know, there's not a lot of jobs
No.
in like language work, I guess. And coming into a space where everybody's involved in language work is so cool because you get to see like something I wouldn't see just if I went and worked literally anywhere else,
Yeah,
you know? And then I'm like, okay, it doesn't seem as bad or as scary anymore because everyone here is also so supportive and like we can relate to each other.
Yeah.
And like I can take little tidbits I've learned along the way and try and navigate the way I would approach learning my language away from everything.
Thanks for listening to Nganabawanga, Stories from the Mobile Language Team, a podcast from the Mobile Language Team at Adelaide University. If you want to learn more about the work we do supporting Aboriginal languages across South Australia, visit the Mobile Language Team website. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to sharing more about language in future episodes. Nakara!